In this video, we'll be looking at football mysteries that are still unsolved. Ever wonder how deep political corruption can penetrate sports? Romania in the 1980 seconds gives us the perfect case study of a communist regime that turned football into a propaganda tool and rigged individual awards to boost national pride. Rodion Kamataru's 1987 Golden Boot win wasn't just suspicious, it was a state-orchestrated fraud that exposed how Nicolae Ceausescu's dictatorship manipulated every aspect of Romanian society, including football. The setup was perfect for corruption. By the mid-1980 seconds, Romanian football had become a complete sham controlled by three Bucharest clubs. Steaua, backed by the army and Ceausescu himself, dominated everything and went on a ridiculous 104-game unbeaten streak. Dinamo, the secret police team, was forced to play second fiddle. Victoria Bucharest existed solely as a puppet club because of police connections. This wasn't competitive football, it was political theater disguised as sport. Kamataru was actually a decent player. He had 75 international caps, played at the 1984 European Championships, and was a legitimate striker for Universitatea Craiova before joining Dinamo in 1986. Nobody questioned his talent. What raised eyebrows was the absolutely insane pattern of his goal scoring. For most of the 1986-87 season, Kamataru performed like a normal striker. By late May, he had scored 24 goals in 28 games, respectable numbers for any forward. Dinamo's season was basically over, sitting second behind Steaua with no chance of catching up. Then something magical happened, or should I say, something criminal. In the final 6 league games, Kamataru scored 20 goals in 6 matches. He scored hat-tricks as a minimum in 5 games and a mere double in the 6th. A player who had never scored more than 23 goals in any other season suddenly became a superhuman goal machine, averaging 3.5 goals per game. The mathematics alone should have triggered every alarm bell in European football. But this was the 1980 seconds, and Romania was hidden behind the Iron Curtain where crazy things happened regularly and nobody could verify anything. Austrian striker Toni Polster, who had 39 goals and thought he'd won the Golden Boot, refused to attend the award ceremony. He said he couldn't honestly shake his hand as a sportsman. Even Romanian media seemed embarrassed, burying the story on inside pages. The most damning evidence was how Kamataru's goals helped him individually but did nothing for Dinamo collectively. Those 6 high-scoring games only earned the team 4 points out of a possible 18. Dinamo was clearly trading losses for easy goals, letting opponents win matches in exchange for those opponents, allowing Kamataru to score at will. When Dinamo faced Steaua in the Romanian Cup final, APS, a match that actually mattered, Kamataru barely touched the ball as Steaua won 1-0. Suddenly, the goal machine disappeared when facing opposition that wouldn't cooperate with the fix. The Romanian sports minister confirmed what everyone suspected after Ceausescu's regime collapsed in 1989. Valentin Ceausescu, the dictator's son and Steaua president, had personally arranged for opposing teams to give Kamataru easy goals in exchange for Dinamo throwing matches. This was corruption orchestrated at the highest levels of government. The president's son was literally calling coaches and telling them to let Dinamo's striker score while ensuring his father's team remained dominant. It was state-sponsored match fixing with the Golden Boot as a consolation prize for Dinamo's cooperation in the larger charade. UEFA eventually withdrew the Golden Boot entirely and didn't bring it back for a decade. When it returned, they introduced a weighting system so goals in major leagues counted more than those scored in corrupt backwaters like Romania. They also retrospectively awarded Polster his rightful Golden Boot 20 years later. Kamataru became the unwitting face of everything wrong with Romanian football under Ceausescu. He was just a pawn in a massive political game, probably aware that goals were coming too easily, but unable to question the system without risking his career or worse. The saddest part is that Kamataru was actually innocent. Players in communist countries had no choice but to follow orders from party officials. Refusing to cooperate meant losing your livelihood, facing persecution, or potentially ending up in prison. Romanian footballers were trapped in a system where survival meant compliance. But the Golden Boot scandal revealed the true depth of state interference in Romanian sports. This wasn't just about one striker scoring suspicious goals, it was about a totalitarian regime using football as propaganda while maintaining the illusion of fair competition. Steawa's 104-game unbeaten streak was obviously aided by favorable refereeing and opponents who knew better than to try too hard against the dictator's team. Dinamo's perpetual runner-up status was, by design, keeping them hungry enough to be competitive but never threatening Steawa's supremacy. The regime used Golden Boot wins by Romanian players, Dudu Georgescu won twice, Dorin Matot once, as proof that their socialist system produced superior athletes. Individual awards became tools of international propaganda, showing the world that Romanian football was thriving under communist leadership. After Ceausescu's fall, the corruption didn't disappear, it just changed forms. The 1,990 seconds saw Romanian football dominated by cartels of clubs exchanging home wins to prevent relegations. The infrastructure for systematic corruption remained in place, just without the political overlay. Kamataru's story perfectly illustrates how authoritarian regimes corrupt everything they touch. A legitimate striker became a symbol of fraud because dictators decided that international recognition was more important than sporting integrity. The man who should have celebrated his greatest achievement instead became a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing politics with sports. And somewhere, Tony Polster was probably thinking he dodged a bullet by not having to shake hands with the face of Romanian football corruption. Now it's time to look at the next mystery that remains unsolved. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. When the Berlin Wall fell and communism collapsed across Eastern Europe, something extraordinary happened in football. Millions of dollars in transfer fees, player contracts, and club assets just vanished into thin air. We're talking about one of the biggest financial mysteries in sports history, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Between 1989 and 1999, as these countries transitioned from communist states to capitalist economies, an estimated hundreds of millions of dollars that should have gone to football clubs, players, and federations simply disappeared. Red Star Belgrade won the European Cup in 1991 with a team worth tens of millions. Within 2 years, all those players were gone and the club was broke. Where did the transfer money go? Dynamo Kiev had some of the best players in Europe. Where are the millions they should have received when those stars moved to Western clubs? The chaos of political transition created the perfect cover for massive theft. Football clubs didn't know if they were private businesses or state-owned entities. There were no proper regulations, no oversight, and definitely no accountability. It was a free-for-all, where anyone with connections could steal millions. Communist-era clubs had been funded by the state, with players essentially employed by the military or secret police. When those systems collapsed overnight, nobody knew who owned what. Player contracts became worthless pieces of paper. Club assets were up for grabs. Transfer rights were meaningless when there was no legal framework to enforce them. Western clubs took full advantage of this chaos. They could sign world-class players for a fraction of their real value because Eastern European clubs were desperate for any cash they could get. But even that reduced money often never reached its intended destination. Corrupt officials, dodgy agents, and criminal organizations saw opportunities everywhere. A player worth $10 million might be sold for $2 million, with half of that disappearing into offshore accounts before it reached the selling club. The official records would show the lower amount, making the theft almost impossible to trace. Yugoslavia's breakup was particularly devastating. The country's football federation had significant assets and cash reserves. When Yugoslavia split into 6 separate nations, that money should have been divided among the new federations. Instead, most of it vanished during the transition. Each new country claimed they never received their share, but nobody could explain where it went. The same pattern repeated across the region. Czechoslovakia split into Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Soviet Union broke into 15 separate nations. East Germany was absorbed into West Germany. Every time a communist state dissolved, football money disappeared. Agent networks played a huge role in the theft. Western agents with connections to Eastern European officials could arrange transfers where the real fees were hidden. They'd create shell companies, fake documentation, and complex payment structures designed to obscure where money was really going. Players themselves were often victims. Many Eastern European stars signed contracts they couldn't understand, with payment structures that seemed legitimate but were designed to steal their earnings. Some players thought they were earning millions but received only a fraction because agents and officials took massive cuts. The privatization process was a goldmine for thieves. State-owned clubs were sold to private investors for ridiculously low prices. Assets worth millions were transferred for thousands. The new owners would immediately sell the best players and pocket the transfer fees, leaving clubs with nothing. Organized crime groups saw football as an easy target. They had the political connections to influence privatization decisions and the financial networks to move stolen money internationally. Many clubs ended up controlled by criminal organizations who used them for money laundering rather than sporting success. Banking systems in these countries were primitive and corrupt. Money could be transferred out of football clubs and into private accounts with minimal documentation. International transfers were even easier to manipulate because there was no coordination between Eastern and Western banking systems. The lack of media scrutiny made the theft easier. Journalists in these countries were more focused on political upheaval than sports corruption. Western media didn't understand the complexity of Eastern European football structures, so obvious theft went unreported. Some estimates suggest that over $500 million in football-related assets disappeared during the 1,990 seconds transition period. That's money that should have gone to developing youth systems, building infrastructure, and keeping talented players in their home countries. The theft had devastating long-term consequences. Eastern European clubs couldn't compete financially with Western teams because their resources had been stolen. The brain drain accelerated as young players saw no future in staying home. Domestic leagues became feeder systems for richer countries. Many of the people responsible for these thefts are now wealthy businessmen, politicians, or sports executives. They used stolen football money to buy legitimacy and influence. Some even returned to football later as successful investors, using money they'd originally stolen from the sport. The saddest part is that this theft destroyed what could have been a golden era for Eastern European football. Red Star Belgrade proved these clubs could compete with anyone when they had resources. Instead of building on that success, the entire region was systematically looted. International football authorities like FIFA and UEFA knew this was happening but did nothing to stop it. They were more interested in expanding their markets into Eastern Europe than protecting clubs from being robbed. Their negligence enabled one of the biggest thefts in sports history. Today, when people wonder why Eastern European clubs can't compete in the Champions League, the answer is simple. Their money was stolen 30 years ago, and nobody was ever held accountable. The beautiful game became an ugly heist, and the thieves got away with it completely.